2014, my lifelong friend Jody Nyquist urged me to become part of a civil rights pilgrimage. They were perfect. As I prepared, they inspired me to immerse myself in books and documentaries of the time, and I looked and listened again at the music of the 50s and 60s, seeing it in the context of the movement. And they were a chance to live the experiences of the civil rights movement of the 50s and the 60s, and reconnected me to those things I had a passion for. Fall quarter of my senior year, I transferred into speech communication and was auditing classes from a communication standpoint for a new discipline. It was called Black History. In other words, the pilgrimages were a chance to connect to an important moment in the country's history and in mine. President Kennedy described happiness as the full use of our powers along lines of excellence, and as someone who grew up singing, "We shall overcome," the pilgrimages were a happy time. They gave me a chance to interact, to be a part of a group, including a number of college students. Man, you talk about hope for the future. It also introduced me to half a dozen people, including Erica and Troy and David, who became part of my family. It was a unique, life-changing, life-affirming, precious, lasting, and ultimately fleeting time. And they also let me create a songbook, giving life to the music of the movement. And in the introduction, I wrote Franklin Graham, Jesus. I got him on my mind, I guess. I don't know. Where did that come from? Holy cow. Franklin Roosevelt believed until his dying day that he would walk again. And with that faith, he gave hope to a crippled nation, and though his detractors were loud and many, his relationship to the American people became one of our country's great love stories. And until the day he died, Abraham Lincoln believed in the power of our better angels and Martin Luther King in a dream, and each of those men now has a monument built around the reflecting pond of our nation as a testament to who they were and to what they believed, and most important, what they believed about our nation and us, we the people. In a similar vein, smaller and still significant, together we went on a pilgrimage. A pilgrimage, as my friend Milt Jones would say, is defined as an exalted purpose of moral significance to or toward a holy place. As I told David, if I were going alone, I'd call what I did a journey. And most importantly, it is his faith and our shared faith that lets me call it a pilgrimage complete with song and singing. And my faith in the spirit of song and singing remains simple and strong. On October 15th in 1969, along with hundreds of thousands of others, I marched around the White House singing, "We shall overcome," believing if we sang loud enough and walked far enough and had faith strong enough that peace would come. All these years later, I no longer sing in hopes of moving mountains, but in the faith that if love fills the spirit of our songs and singing, that when we go into the mountains, we might be moved. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday, and we shall live in peace. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. few days after committing to this pilgrimage, I left for a 5-week tour of Japan with the Brothers Four. And one night in a hotel room in Tokyo, in a combination of memory and imagination, I remembered who I'd been and what I believed when I turned 21 in March of 1968. And it was clear to me as I began the spring quarter of my junior year at the University of Washington that Robert Kennedy should and likely would soon become president, that Martin Luther King Jr. would continue to preach nonviolence and social justice for years to come, that the Vietnam War would soon be over, that the Kerner Report issued a month earlier would, as Dr. King said, offer a prescription to heal our divided land. Mine was a faith rooted in the religious values of a small town and what I believed to be an all-American family. And within weeks, King and Kennedy would both be dead, and Lyndon Johnson would choose not to even invite the members of the Kerner Commission to the White House. And by 1969, Nixon's secret plan for peace would morph into a secret war in Laos and Cambodia, culminating in the shootings of 4 Kent State students by National Guard troops and 2 students killed by police at Jackson State. And at the same time, my anger at being told not to sing anti-war songs at an all-city Young Life meeting would prove catalyst enough for me to turn my back on organized religion. And in June of 1969, I was told my father had been in a mental institution when I was born, and suddenly all I'd learned growing up and my place in the world was somehow in doubt. And in that Tokyo hotel room all those years later, what I was not aware of before was finally and suddenly clear to me. That at 21, my world was abuzz with faith and hope. And then at 22, I'd lost faith in God and country and family and self. And what was also clear as I watered those memories with tears was that at the moment I knew in the marrow of my being that faith was strong, that hopes were high and joy abounds and love abides. What my friend Jim Nystrom, helping me get ready for today, asked, how did you get that faith back? It's important to note I'm not talking about religious faith, but faith in ourselves and in each other and the world we live in. And Jim was asking a good question that does not have a simple answer, because in part it's hard to know where faith comes from. But I told him it came in part from facing my personal fears and demons, learning to love them, though not always like them, finding my truth, reconciling that truth with who I've been and what I've done. Not as simple as it might sound. But when I did, I found faith in myself and hope for the days ahead. And in the process, discovered faith in those around me and in us, and in what President Obama called the power of we. A big, dysfunctional human family, and I believe if we can somehow recognize each other, our better angels will cheer and maybe even take us home. When I was 21, I had faith in God. I had faith in my country and all she was. I had faith in my family. I had faith in myself. When you got all that, you don't need much else. Faith is strong. Was it just a year later, and the country's still at war? Leaders are lying or they're dying, can't find God anymore. I learn a family's secrets, makes me feel deceived. I can never tell that faith is strong. These years later, world is still ablaze. When I look deep inside, I can feel the faith. I got faith in you. I got faith in me. And I think we're gonna make it. But we gotta believe. Faith